Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Insert the music here. Insert the music here. All right. Good evening, tribe, and welcome to Merriwether's World, where I try and show you my world. And since your world is the same one I'm on, there's some overlap here. Okay, cool. Tonight I will be talking about the immune system and all the amazing complexity involved in its defense of you. It's really awesome. And I will say it's pretty complex. So there are going to be some parts where there will be some simplification, some hand waving, things like that. All right. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Mark Merriwether Vorderbruggen, PhD chemist, also author of Idiot's Guide Foraging, and doer of many other things. You can jump over to Foraging Texas and see all that. Yeah, check it out. Like I said, right now there's over 220 edible and medicinal plants in great detail there. All right. As usual, let's start off with some housekeeping stuff. So for those of you who want to see my website, yeah, there we go. One of the most important aspects of it, well, there's lots of important aspects of this, but of course, Medicine Man Plant Co. Google ads. Be gone, Google ads. So if you wonder how I support myself and my family, it is through the creation and sale of some of the, in my opinion, best herbal medicine supplements available on the market. I have some really cool fans that help support that. Hey, cat. So check it out. But probably more importantly for you all are the upcoming classes. I do need to update that. Just this week, I finalized a number of 2021 classes, both in person and online. So that'll be good. And then things like that. So I also want to do a shout out to Wazoo Survival for their help in creating the Wazoo Survival Foraging Bandana. It was a joint project between Wazoo, me, and Dr. Nicole Appelian, who has been on the History Channels alone twice now, and a number of other primitive survival type things. So shout out to Wazoo, because they are the ones that pay for the StreamYard account that allows me to talk to you. So yay, Wazoo. And then one other, since we are talking about defensive action, Fear and Dread over in Vidor, Texas. You know what? It helps, wouldn't it, if I put up links? So, of course, if you're interested in the foraging bandana, you can go there. And the owner of Fear and Dread has given the tribe a special coupon code, TRIBE, to save you money with things there. So, you know, if you need stuff to help protect and defend and take care and treat and heal and escape, they got you covered. Okay, so now let's jump back to me here. Rather than hit you with a bunch of sponsors, not that I have a bunch of sponsors, but I will throw some more up throughout the course of the show. But really, what you are here for is to learn about yourself and how you defend yourself against, you know, enemies, foreign and domestic, because your immune system doesn't just defend yourself against outsiders, it even defends you against you. Usually that's great, sometimes that's bad. All right, so without further ado, let me bring up application window. There we go. All right. So to start talking about the immune system, I have to talk about what it's made of. And unlike the brain, the liver, and the spleen, all these sort of things, the immune system is a whole bunch of different systems that act both independently and with communication among the parts. So things like tissues, the skin, mucous membrane, lymph, bone marrow, the thymus and the hypothalamus, spleen. All these sort of things play a role. And so I don't get confused. I need to do one thing here. Let me do that. And okay. I just need to jump up. Okay. Yeah. So all these things work together to keep you safe. Normally, when you think of the immune system, you think of things coming along and munching on, bacteria and viruses. There's so much more. And so we're going to cover that tonight, including, big part on how they know what to eat and what not to eat. So lots and lots of different parts all fall under the title immune system. So now let's start breaking it down a little more. So if you really want to, the easiest way to think about the immune system is two major sides. You have the innate and the adaptive. The innate is very nonspecific. It's just roaming around, eating whatever it thinks is the enemy based on certain markers, but it doesn't target specific, what are called antigens. When you hear me use the word antigen, think of it as just, replace antigen with bacteria or virus or parasitic worm or cancer cell or fungi, bad actors. So an antigen, think anti-good, if that helps. So an antigen is just something bad that wants to harm your body, and so your immune system has to fight against it. So the innate, it's non-specific. So to think about it like skin. Skin protects you from everything. It doesn't just protect you from certain viruses. It protects you from, any bacteria trying to get in. And let me just, add to this. Anytime you help any of these parts, you are helping raise your immunity to infection. So that's good. So lotion, skin lotion to keep your skin nice and strong and supple and healed is key, because that outer leather layer of your skin is teeming with all sorts of bacteria and viruses and nasty, E. coli and staph and Lord knows what else, depending on where you go. But as long as your skin is intact, it really does a great job of keeping those things out. Next one, mucous membrane. So pretty much any opening to the outside world through your skin is lined with mucous membrane. So basically moist, slimy areas whose purpose is to basically entrap invading species, the bacteria and viruses, in kind of a quicksand jello sort of thing. So, your sinuses, your nose, all the way, from your entry point of your, digestive tract to the exit points and any other exit points you might have, the linings where they, things can possibly enter have a slime on them. And the slime has different peptides and proteins and other molecules that are just general antibiotic materials. Again, they're nonspecific, but if something gets caught in that slime, chemicals in that slime then tries to kill the bacteria or the virus. Very handy. Stomach acid. Stomach acid is considered part of the immune system because it will destroy a number of bad actors that you eat. But also keep in mind, your stomach is filled with good gut bacteria. So by keeping the good gut bacteria healthy and fed and strong, it goes a long ways towards overwhelming, destroying, or stealing the resources from bad, potentially bad gut bacteria. So stomach health, gut health, very, very important. Okay, now we get to more the eating type things, the phagocytes. Now, when people think of the immune system, they think of things coming along and actually gobbling up bad actors. And phagocytes fall into that category. And we'll talk more about them in a little bit. But think of them as the Pac-Men, the waka, 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 that comes through and eats, antigens that it finds just randomly floating around in your blood, or what it considers to be an antigen. Okay. Back one. Inflammation. The act of inflammation. If you've ever seen, like, you've cut yourself and the edges turn red and kind of raised up and so forth, that is an immune response, part of your immune system. It has very specific purposes, which we'll get into when we talk. Just what that inflammation, what causes that inflammation and what its purpose is. And then even fevers. So when you get a fever, that is your body just trying to kill something. It isn't specifically targeted to the COVID-19 or the E. coli. It's just saying, you know what? Getting hot helps, so I'm just going to get hot and hope that kills what's causing problems. So those are the innate immune system actors. They are the things that, like I said, are non-specific defense mechanisms. Think of them as the wall that just, blocks against any invaders. Now, you also have the adaptive immune system. And the whole purpose of vaccinations is to activate this adaptive immune system, because it is really, really powerful and really cool. What it does is it seeks out and destroys specific targets. It is designed to, seek out very specific enemy cells. It is told which specific, things, antigens in the body need destroying, and they seek it out and they try and destroy it. So they are very specific. They are called into action in very specific ways and target very specific. So think of them as they are these snipers sitting up on the walls of your non-specific defenses. So yeah, snipers. That's a good way of thinking it. Good job, Mark. Okay. I don't see any questions, but I see a lot of wine drinking and assorted comments, so that's good. Yeah, it's a class you can drink during, like, all my college classes. Anyway, okay, so let's talk about innate defense. And in this case, we will discuss what happens when the skin gets broken, because that's one of the easiest ways for an infection to set in and start doing damage. So let's say something happens, someone, you're riding your bicycle along and someone opens their car door directly in front of you because they didn't look, and you smash into it and you go tumbling across the pavement, you get all tore up. So now you have all this damaged skin. And one of the first things that happens is there's remember, the top layer is just dead and inert. The top layer of your skin is it's leather. It doesn't do anything but offer thick, heavy, armored protection. But if you break through that and start rupturing the lower levels, in particular, a type of skin cell called a mast cell, which is part of the living layer of the skin, it triggers a series of chemical signals that says, hey, I'm damaged. We need to get help here right away. And one of the main ones it releases is histamine. Now, I like trying to relate things to things that people know about, and I know you guys. So if you want to think about what histamine is, think histamine is Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings. Mainly, he goes around and tells other things, hey, you got to get your butt in gear. You got to start taking care of this. Very rarely does he actually do big battle himself. If you read the books, he's kind of an instigator and a whip. He gets people moving. So that's what histamine is. It sets a whole bunch of things in motion. So one of the things histamine does is it triggers vasodilation. In other words, it causes the blood vessels in the wounded area to get bigger. By doing this, more blood flows to the area heats up. Remember, we're talking your skin, which is generally cooler than the core of your body temperature. So by bringing blood to it from your core, more blood, excess blood to it, you increase the heat of the cells in that area, which in turn, through the Arrhenius equation in chemistry, the reaction rate inside the cells increases. So everything the cells are now doing, they are going to do at a faster rate, including all the chemical actions required to rebuild tissue. So the excess blood increases the heat, which speeds up the healing of the cells right from the get-go. So that's cool. Another thing the histamine does is it increases the permeability of both the capillaries and the lymph system in the area. So it makes it kind of leaky, if you will. So the capillaries become leaky. So you're not just bleeding because you've torn through some capillaries and hopefully, not vessels or arteries, but the histamine actually triggers even more leakage. The reason being is because that then has a couple of features. First, it causes a swelling in the area. So this blood and lymph is soaking into what's called the intercellular areas, kind of the areas between the swells, and they start pumping that up, and the whole thing swells up kind of like a sponge. When you take they have those like dehydrated sponges and you put them in water and they swell up, kind of like that. Because what does that do is it constricts the flow of any invading, microbes from spreading out from that wound because, it's swollen up and, fat. You can't get through it. So it forms a secondary barrier. That's cool. It's cool to me. Another thing that happens is by leaking, it delivers the proteins to the area that are responsible for clotting and scab formation. So by leaking more, it's not just the damaged capillaries and vessels, it's a bunch of the capillaries in the areas, even the undamaged ones are bleeding and producing the clotting factors or delivering the clotting factors to cause that scab to form up. But then also they are delivering more of the macrophages. The macrophages, those are the Pac-Men coming in to eat things. So by increasing the permeability of the capillaries, and lymph in your area, it speeds up the delivery of the stuff the body needs to, seal the wound and start eating any things that got through the wall, things like that. Oh, here's a really good question. If I can get the mouse over there. Okay. Does fighting one thing hinder your body's ability to fight another, or does it go completely fortress and fight all at once? Great question. Your body is constantly fighting thousands, if not millions, of different enemies. It's very capable of fighting lots and lots and lots of battles. It's only in the most, grandest battle royals where all the resources are being taken up that you can run out of the ability to fight things. So it's like the United States policy at one time, it wanted to be able to fight wars on, total war on 4 fronts, or maybe it was 7 fronts. Kind of what your body is. Your body basically is designed to handle, fairly big battles anywhere in your body at the same time. Like on, here on me, I had here, I had across my shoulder, the back of my head. I mean, all those places were battle zones, and the body's going, yeah, we got this. Not a problem. So yeah, if you have a fully functioning immune system, it has the power to fight many battles. It's designed to fight many battles at the same time. Okay, and then another thing that the histamine does is it is the activation signal. Remember in the Lord of the Rings when Pippin climbed up the tower in the city and lit the signal beacons, and it sent signal beacons out and calling the riders of the Rohirrim to come rescue them. That's the final action of the histamine, is to alert the cavalry, and say, hey, we need warriors here now. Okay, so histamine, really, really big, probably the main immune system signal at the initial stage of attack. There are other secondary signal molecules, fatty acid prostaglandins, kinogens, cytokines, and we will talk about cytokines in particular because they actually end up playing a big role in other aspects of the immune system. But for now, say goodbye to fatty acid and prostaglandins and kinogens because they were just little actors and you will never see them again. Okay. Oops. What the? Okay, here we go. Okay, so you got the broken skin. We mentioned the macrophages. So, the creatures coming in that are the cells that are specifically designed to eat things, to eat the antigens. Isn't it a lovely picture of Merriwether when she was young and well-armed? Okay, so when the skin breaks, basically the phagocytes assemble. A phagocyte is things that eat, antigens. So the first to arrive are the neutrophils, or the neutrophils. To help you understand how they work, think bees. They swarm in like bees. Each neutrophil can only attack one invader and eats it, and then they both die. But in the process of the neutrophil dying, it kills the invader too. So like a bee can only sting once, can only sting one person and then it dies. That's the same with the neutrophils. It can only, grab one individual antigen, one bacteria, one virus particle, one parasitic worm, one fungi spore, but it grabs it and, dies with it together. Okay. Second thing to show up, and show up as a little hand wavy here, so are the macrophages. Now think of these as spiders. So there are two types of macrophages. The free ones that are free to roam about the body, or at least around the tissue, but generally around the body, anywhere. And then there are tethered ones that are bound strictly to organs and tissues. So like you have macrophages bound to your eye. You have macrophages tethered to your kidneys. You have macrophages tethered to your spleen and any other organ you care to, or tissue, muscles, things like that are sitting there just waiting. They're tigers on a leash or giant spiders on a leash, staying in their web, not going out looking for prey. They can only go after prey that comes within range of their tether. But the nice thing about them is they can eat lots of stuff. They eat it, and then, for lack of a better term, digestive proteins inside the macrophage start breaking down the invader, the antigen, and destroying it. What's really cool is then it exudes bits and pieces of what it's eaten and wears it on its membrane like battle trophies. It has a purpose, though. So the macrophages, they are eating, these bad guys and dissolving them. It can eat more than one, and it takes the parts and sticks it on its membrane, like I said, as some sort of weird trophy. Okay. And finally, there are the natural killer cells. Think of these as the scorpions. Their job is to patrol around the body. And then if they find a cell that has become infected, they stab it, inject poison, and kill that cell. So let's go sideways for a second, like viruses. Viruses, once they get into the cell, they hijack the cellular machinery and start making more viruses, more viral particles. That's the reproductive strategy of a virus. It finds a particular type of cell that it can get into, hijacks the DNA, the RNA, and has the cellular machinery start making new viruses. Well, in doing so, this changes the surface of the cell. And so the killer T cells sees a change in, the self cell, the human cell, and goes, "You have changed. You're no longer one of us. I kill you. and it kills it. It injects a poison into it and it kills it. Oh, yeah, some more good questions here. So, yes, Nathan, you are absolutely correct. The neutrophils, when they die, they are responsible for the formation of pus. So the white gooey stuff that you find in, like you say, zits and infections, that is just piles and piles of dead neutrophils that have been trying to protect you. And yeah, so white blood cells are more in the adaptive sort of thing, but there's some people hear white blood cells, they hear immune system, they have killer T white blood cells, so they kind of know, what's going on here. So for at this level, and cat OS, nurse cat, feel free to jump in and correct, but I don't mind if you consider them to be white blood cells, because, yeah. Yep. Thank you, cat. Neutrophils are a type of white blood cell. Pus has lots of neutrophils. Yep. Okay. So back to the killer or the natural killer cells. Isn't that just a great name? What's your job in the body? I'm the natural killer. Okay. So all nucleated self cells, so all the cells in your body that have a nucleus and DNA, which is pretty much everything except for the red blood cells, has on its surface what's called a Mhc-1 protein. So this is a major histocompatibility complex 1. And it's basically a thing that tags you, your cell as you. So, like shirts and skins or flag football, when one team has one color flags and the other team has the other color flags. Well, in your body, every cell that has a nucleus and DNA has a flag on it that says, I am you, I am self. Now, when viruses or cancer takes over a cell, other proteins start appearing on the surface of the cell. And if the killer T cell, it goes up and starts going, okay, you have, X number of HCM1 cells, good. But you got all this other weird stuff that I don't recognize. There's a lot more of that weird stuff I don't recognize. That says to me, this cell has been hijacked. So I kill you! Stab with poison. And so that's what the killer T cells does. So you are constantly having cells turn cancerous in your body. And in most cases, the killer T cells come along and destroy them. It's when, for some reason, they don't, that what we really think of as cancer forms. Okay. So these are still part of the innate defenses. They are just gobbling anything that basically lacks that HCM1 signal. So they're just going around chomp, kill. All right, I guess I got to move the cursor over here. Okay, so that's just the innate defenses, the random, non-specific, the wall, the barrier, the cactuses, the landmines that your body has set up. Like I said, I mentioned, like the mucous membranes, pretty much every fluid in your body is filled with defensive landmines waiting to destroy the, invaders, which is pretty cool because we are constantly under attack by invaders. We are a rich source of nutrients for invaders. Okay, and speaking of invaders, we'll jump to the next one here quick. Hide that. Okay, gotta stop that. I gotta do a shout out to some more. Oops. Okay, here we go. Another sponsor. Okay, speaking of taking care of things, Arborists. So, plants, plants can't run, so they got to fight. So plants have an immune system too. But just like, humans, sometimes the plant immune system gets overrun and bad things can start to grow and invade and take over. So Arborists is, in my opinion, probably the top tree doctor out there for diagnosing infections in trees and plants and all that. They have a whole lab dedicated to figuring out just what is attacking your tree, your plants, your yard, and then hitting it with all sorts of really cool defensive medicines to try and save the tree, the yard, things like that. So when you think tree doctor, think Arbor True. And you know what? Hey, let's put a coupon up. Actually, there isn't a coupon. Let's put a link up to Arbor True, because that's important, because they Arbor True doctors. Okay, so there's that. And then whoops. Stop screen. Why is that not doing what I want it to do? Stop. And let me go one more here. Let's just do that. Sure. Okay. So yeah. So the uncommon bees, you know them, you love them. They have amazing types of honeys and waxes and infused stuff and everything you could possibly want that comes from a bee, and blended with all sorts of herbs and everything else. So let me put this up, and they actually have a coupon code. So if you use the secret Foraging Texas Forking Weeds coupon code, anytime you get a 10% savings. And if you use it between 8 p.m. and 9:30 on Thursday nights, show night, you get 25% off. And let me tell you, no one has been disappointed by their stuff. You want habanero infused honey, you want chamomile infused honey, you want strawberry infused honey. And so I've worked with them to come up with different infused flavors. They have their own freeze drying equipment. When possible, they buy the local fruits and herbs to freeze dry and powder and add to the honeys. Absolutely amazing stuff. Okay. Good. Good. Let me see what happens if I do this. Wait, did that work? Okay. All right. So now on to the adaptive immune systems. And so when you think adaptive, they adapt to a specific enemy. They can recognize a very specific foe and try and destroy it. Okay, so during that yell for help, the histamine, some of the chemicals called pyrogens, pyrogen chemicals are released. And this is another set of those signal flares, lighting alerting Gondor that, Gondor is in need, sort of thing. So what these do, the first thing they do when the body calls for it is they do travel to the brain and the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is, it's involved in a lot of metabolism and regulation in your body. And it activates a fever, which we already talked was, kind of non-specific, but this is still the first step in activating the innate defenses, is these pyrogens triggering the brain and the hypothalamus to cause a fever. So people are familiar with fevers, are there to try and kill things. People don't realize another thing that happens, though, from this message is the spleen starts to hold on to iron and zinc. Normally, the spleen is involved in getting the iron and zinc out to the body where it's needed. But when the pyrogen signal comes and the fever starts up, the spleen holds on to the iron and the zinc so as to starve the bacteria and the viruses, because usually the iron and the zinc is an important nutrient, especially for bacteria. So by withholding iron and zinc, it starts, starving, weakening the invading forces. It's like, the saying, never start a land war in Russia, because your supply chains are just too damn big. And then when winter comes, they get destroyed and your army starves. So that's what your body is trying to do. It, somewhere along the evolutionary tree, it realized, hey, when the signal goes up, I got to stop feeding my body the iron and the zinc. It starts holding on to it. Now, zinc is important for other parts of the body, but it's also a key nutrient. So people ask, well, then why do we take zinc when we're sick? Well, because it is a nutrient that your body needs too for healing. So, by the time you're taking the zinc, you're getting the sniffles, your innate system has been pretty much overrun, and your adaptive system is in charge. But as soon as that fever starts, you've started starving the enemy. So by the time you start increasing the zinc supplements in your diet, it's kind of good for your body, but the antigens have been weakened some already. So it's kind of a toss-up when it comes right down to it. But generally, zinc has a lot of beneficial aspects in the body, and so supplying the zinc after you've started, realizing you're sick, isn't going to interfere with the zinc starvation of the antigens. Got that? Okay, good. Okay, and so the hypothalamus, I'm not going to show you mine, but yeah, it's kind of under the brain, right by the pituitary type thing there. Okay, so the signal fires have been lit, the alert has gone out. So what happens next? Well, the special forces arrive. So now we're switching from the Lord of the Rings and kind of going to Star Wars. So the special forces, they are trained and activated to deal with a very specific threat. One of the cool things about it is it remembers past enemies and can very quickly respond against them, which is why, usually you only get mumps once, you only get chickenpox once, you only get a lot of those things once, because once you have it and you've beaten it, your adaptive forces recognize it and can quickly go in and take care of it before it has a chance to cause any problems. The other thing is it works in teams. The innate one is just kind of random sort of things. Yeah, the mast cells releasing histamine kind of trigger everything, but after that, everything does its own thing. In the adaptive immune system, you actually have teamwork going on. And so it's a series of white blood cells. So you have the B lymphocyte and the T lymphocyte. The B lymphocyte, think of them as the scouts that are out, looking around, searching for the enemy and tagging them, saying, these are what need to be killed. And then the T lymphocytes are mainly the ones that do that. And again, they work as a team. Remember in an army isn't just made of soldiers that shoot things. There are the radio corps that signal where the army has to go. There is regulatory, or there are, the officers that decide where the resources should go, and tell the soldiers when to attack and when to stop attacking. So we're going to talk about each one of these now in detail. Now here's a good question, and I don't have an answer to it. Why do we get chills? Does it have something to do with fevers? I have no clue. That is a very good question. I'm going to have to look that up. I don't know what the medicinal purpose of a chill is. The one thing, maybe, if I had to guess, again, this is just a scientific wild guess, when you are cold, you start to shiver. Shivering, the purpose of shivering is to work the blood vessel, or work the muscles, and in doing so, it generates heat. So maybe the chills are a secondary way of generating heat, because usually you get the alternating, the chills and the fever. And if I had to guess, that's my guess, that the chills are there just like they are when you're cold to help the body generate heat. Don't know if that's true or not, but it sounds likely to me anyway. Okay, so let's talk about these things, starting with the B lymphocytes. Think of the B lymphocytes as Yoda. Yoda, they are. I can't do a good Yoda imitation. So they grow in the bone marrow. And that's why people who undergo like different chemotherapy and radiation therapy, where the bone marrow gets destroyed, they suddenly become very, very susceptible to diseases because they lost all their defensive cells. Okay, so they're grown in the bone marrow and they are trained in the bone marrow. So they spend their life in the bone marrow being taught by other B lymphocyte and certain T lymphocytes, veterans of previous wars, basically saying, all right, kid, this is what, when you see this and this and this, that's the enemy, kill it, or at least tag it. So like I said, previous veterans of other infections, the B lymphocyte and T cells return to the bone marrow and start training the new B lymphocytes to recognize the enemy. Awesome. So the B lymphocyte end up being covered, an individual B lymphocyte cell will be covered with 10,000 different protein receptors on the surface of itself. It kind of gives you an idea how big the B lymphocytes actually are, but they can still squeeze around in areas. But they are covered with up to 10,000 different cell receptors. And these are what are called the antibodies. So the antibodies is what it uses to grab onto the antigens. Remember, antigens are the bad actors. You're right, Kat. So these protein receptors, they're a mixture of antibodies that the body has already developed to fight previous enemies, as well as randomly mutated ones that, in the hopes that when it's out there, one of these random mutated ones will be close enough to bind to some marker on the surface of a new enemy. Okay, so the B cells are designed to recognize previous enemies and also hopefully glom onto new enemies. So when you're out, these B cells are released, and triggered when the histamine. There are some floating around in general, but when they are called to action by the pyrogen signal and even the histamine, they go out, start looking for things. Okay, so you got the B cell with some antibody, and lo and behold, that antibody seemed to match something on the surface of the invader, and it binds onto it. And it goes, aha, I'm bound onto you. Now, they have things to protect them from generally binding onto self-marked cells. Remember, the self has a little flag that says, I'm me, don't attack me. So I lost track. The hands are, the B cells are looking around for things that don't have that. And then, oh, I fit like this. So it binds onto it. So now the B cell is bound to the antigen. And then the B cell starts cloning itself. So the B cells, it's a cell, it starts splitting, mitosis, and making a bunch of copies of itself. But it makes two types of copies of itself. One copy is the memory copy. So the memory, it flows back to the brain, to the bone marrow. The memory B lymphocyte flows back to the bone marrow to help train more B lymphocytes to recognize this antigen that it realizes. But it also produces effector B lymphocyte cells. So during that cloning process, it's splitting some memory and what's called the effector B lymphocyte. And what it does is the effector, it starts cranking out tons of this antibody. So the antibody, originally was bound to the surface of the B lymphocyte, but it doesn't have to be. think of the antibody that the effectors are making as ninja throwing stars. And the throwing stars are designed to specifically stick only to the antigens. So the effectors start pumping out, just filling the area with these antibodies. These antibodies start glomming on to the antigens, and this glomming on has several properties. First, that antibody has its own tag on it that will attract other killer T cells to it. They also do what's called a swarm block, because usually on the antigen, there are multiple of these surface protein that the antigen fit. And so it ends up these antigens start covering the entire surface. Sorry, the antibodies start covering the entire surface of the antigen, the invader, preventing it from doing anything. So it just gloms onto it and says, it's like when you got 1,000 chickens on a mule. I don't know, but they glom on and basically keep the invader from doing anything. Another thing it does is these antibodies can bind to multiple antigens. They have 2 different spots where they can glom onto things. So they have 2 hands, so they can grab one here and they can grab one here. And then the end result is you have a whole bunch of antigens grabbing onto a whole bunch of the antibodies. I hate the way scientists name these things. A whole bunch of antibodies glomming onto multiple antigens, forming a big clump. We call it agglutination. So just a clumpy mass. And this clumpy mass, again, it can't move very far. It can't do much because it's all stuck together and can't do anything. And so it's stuck there, and it makes it easier for the killer T cells that the antibodies are within, come here, eat us, are doing. Now, one of the cool things about these antibodies is a mother's antibodies are passed to her child. So the ninja throwing stars, not the B lymphocytes, but the antibodies they end up producing that do the death tag, the swarm block, and the agglutination. So this can be passed, the antibodies can be passed from the mother through the placenta, through the blood to the baby, and also through the mother's milk, giving the child some initial protection against antigens, against infectious diseases. Same time, the blood from someone who has successfully fought a disease, say Ebola. One of the things that doctors will do is they can extract the antibodies from a patient that survived Ebola, inject them into someone that is undergoing or is suffering from Ebola, and the antibodies still work as markers telling the white blood cells, the killer T cells, to come here and eat me. So it still works as it speeds up the ability of the white blood cells in the Ebola patient to target the Ebola virus. Now, because it is just the antigens, not the entire cell, once the antigen is used up and destroyed, it doesn't reproduce. The baby can't reproduce it. The Ebola patient won't reproduce those specific antibodies. They have to develop their own antibodies. But the fact that we can pass antibodies to each other is pretty amazing. Okay, so that's the purpose of the B lymphocyte. They are the first thing that gets involved. Early on, they are trained to be Jedi Masters, and then they go out and they find the enemy, and then they call in the rest of the troops. Okay, so now we got T lymphocytes. Like the B lymphocytes, they are born in the bone marrow, but then they travel and are raised in the thymus. The thymus is a gland just above the heart. So they're hanging out there and waiting to be released. Now, because they move from the bone marrow to the thymus, they don't get the same training to recognize friend or foe. Well, to recognize friend and foe, like the B lymphocytes. So they're at the time when they're in the thymus, they're not really specific. But when the B lymphocyte starts releasing the specific antibodies, the thymus and the white blood cells there, the T blood cells there, lymphocytes, they get their training then. And then they are trained to kill just one specific antigen. So they are only going generally respond to a specific antibody. There's some problems that can occur. There's some ways that can screw that up. But the T blood cells, they're only going to be interested in one particular antigen. You could have like some sort of E. coli bacteria there, and right next to it an Ebola, I guess Ebola is a virus. The T lymphocyte, if it has the E. coli antibody, it's just going to go after the E. coli. It's going to completely ignore the extremely dangerous Ebola virus because that's not what it was taught to kill. Okay, I mentioned earlier, there are 3 types of these T lymphocytes. There are the helpers, and they are what I call the radio core. They are the ones that bond with the antigen and then mark it as death. So the helpers, they just go in, they don't have the ability to kill. They just have the ability to say, here, kill this as soon as possible. So the signal they send out is made of the molecule which we call the cytokine or cytokine. And so it releases a bunch of the cytokine that then tells the cytotoxic, the fighters, come and start destroying things. And so the cytotoxic cells, T cells, Sherry, I just saw your question, way more advanced than this. Right now, I'm just going to be talking about the immune system. Maybe later on, I'll talk about the vaccines and all that. But anyway, long story short, quick, RNA is just another thing that an antibody can be designed for. Okay, so I guess I did talk about it. So the cytotoxic ones, they are the killers. And what they have is they have the ability to, they find the helper cells, and then the helper cells say, hey, kill this cell I'm bound to. And the cytotoxic T lymphocytes then inject poison into that and kills it. And, of course, kills the helper T cell too, I believe. I wasn't quite clear on that. But the cytotoxic, they are starting to inject things. While they're doing this, they also have the ability to reproduce. They may be born in the bone marrow, but they have the ability to undergo meiosis. And so they start splitting. And so once they get to the area where the infection seems to be heavy, they start reproducing and produce more fighters. But they also produce some, the B cells sent back to the bone marrow to train future generations of B lymphocytes what an enemy looks like. So if you think about it, the base cell for the B and the T, it's all the same thing. It's just where is it raised and how is it raised? Is it raised in the loving bone marrow and trained to, recognize all sorts of things? Or is it taken away to a monastery above the heart and trained to focus in on just one thing? But when the cytotoxic splits, to increase more soldiers, it also creates some more B trainer cells, kind of like the bee did too, and sends it back there. The body really wants to know how to fight an enemy again. Okay, so you with me there? Okay. Okay, the final thing involved is the regulatory T cells. And what they're doing is they're just sitting back, watching the battle, observing And if it feels like more T blood cells, the cytotoxic ones are required, it will send out signals to cause the cytotoxic to create more cytotoxic and fewer memory, or have more T lymphocytes delivered from the thymus to join the battle. But at the same time, they're paying attention because the cytotoxic fighters, they are kind of berserkers. They get into a blood frenzy, and normally they will just attack what they were told to attack, what they were trained to attack. But if you get too many of them and not enough enemy, they can start attacking self cells, yourself. And you might have heard a cytokine cascade. And what that is, the Spanish flu was a big problem, that it interfered with the regulatory T cells, caused the cytotoxics and the helper T to just flood the body with cytokine, which caused a massive increase in the T lymphocytes. And so they just started attacking everything in sight, lung tissue, everything around the infected area also started getting attacked. So the regulatory T cells, they're very important because their job is to say, "Go, guys, we're good, we're done. We beat the infection, go home." And without them, your immune system would just go crazy. Holy moly, it's late. Okay. Okay, so that's what a cytokine cascade is. That's basically when the good turns bad. Regulatory T cell failure, and the cytokines are produced in massive amounts, which trigger massive amounts of the T cells, and so the body starts attacking itself. So another way the good turns bad, Darth Vader, is the B lymphocyte corruption. So remember that the B lymphocytes, they're the ones that initially tag an antigen, an invader, and say, "Hey, this is what we need to kill." Sometimes the B cells get confused and they'll tag a tissue in your body and says, "Hey, this is the enemy, come here and attack it." And the T cells go and they attack it and destroy it. So this is the cause of assorted autoimmune diseases, where the body thinks some tissue in it is an enemy because the B lymphocyte made a mistake. So Hashimoto's, that's where the B lymphocytes think your thyroid or cells in your thyroid are an enemy and triggers attack of it. Lupus affects multiple organs. Type 1 diabetes affects the pancreas, in particular the cells that make the insulin. So your body destroys the cells it needs to utilize, glucose, the insulin. And so this is a problem. And there are a lot of theories as to what causes this. Why do the helper T cells, develop this? And like I said, remember way back, one of the things going on with the helper T cells is they have, along with antibodies designed to fight enemies that the body already recognizes, it has assorted random shaped antibodies that can just, accidentally glom onto something on the surface of one of your tissue cells. Another thing is, well, the more trained the blood cells are in your immune system are, the better the B lymphocytes are at recognizing new invaders. So encountering a lot of infectious agents at low levels trains your body on how to, it helps more distinguish the good from the bad. So there's a theory. One lady has put out, one doctor, medical doctor, lupus is a lot more common in women than men. And part of the theory, and there's always exceptions to this. So I know some of you are going to say, well, I did that when I was growing up, and I have lupus. But in general, parents keep their little girls out of the mud puddles and out of the cow patties more than they keep the boys. And so because the little girls are kept in a more sterile environment growing up, their immune system doesn't get the training it needs. Theory. Don't know. I know a number of people who grew up on farms and still came down with lupus. But allergies are another case where the body has been tricked into thinking when this pollen or something shows up, the body has developed antibodies against that pollen, let's say. But while it was doing that, it also developed antigens against, say, sinus tissue or something. And so when the pollen shows up, the body releases things to try and destroy the pollen, but at the same time, it co-releases things that are attacking your body. So, problem there. But yeah, a lot of complex stuff going on, a lot of signaling, a lot of saying yes, no, all that sort of thing. Yeah, Deborah. So that was my answer to no childhood diseases. Dad's tomboy out of 4 girls. Yeah. I mean, they show. And so allergies are a prime example. A lot of farm kids and a lot of third world countries and sort of things. Asthma is an allergic response, is an immune system response. And so in places where kids were in the dirt a lot, there's a lot less incidences of asthma and allergies. Okay. All right. Wow. Okay. So we're 1 minute past here. Yeah. The immune system is pretty amazing. It's constantly fighting. You are constantly covered in things that want to eat you. It's constantly fighting. It has all sorts of things. The evolutionary aspects, all these different signals and powers. I mean, I touched on the very, very top of the immune system, but it's there for you. It doesn't seem to be in the news a lot, but anything you can do to help your immune system helps your body. Some other defensive things that I covered inside the cells, when they realize something is invading, they can start doing also stuff inside the cells to try and fight it, that are part of the innate defense system that I didn't even touch on. But lots of what your body has, lots of ways of defending yourself. The fact that you get sick really shows, just how many enemies are out there. Few other things, just since I have your attention. Actually, it looks like I lost a lot of people. Bummer. Oh well. But yeah, the amount of invaders showing up, that plays a role, because invaders, once they're in and they're starting to reproduce, the bigger the army that invades, the more quickly it can grow before the body can repel it back. So reducing the amount of antigens you take in plays a role in fighting and training your body how to fight it. Okay. Hey, Melissa. Hi, Melissa. Yeah. So that's your immune system. Hopefully it helps you understand you a little bit better, what's going on, because you are fascinating. Humans, man, I'm glad I'm on this planet because you all are so cool. So yeah. Things you can do to help your immune system, of course, sleep, exercise, eat right, keep it neutral, proper nutrition, exercise, maintaining your skin, because that's your first line of defense, and trying not to dive into pits of infectious disease and rub them all over yourself. Okay, on that note, I am going to sign off. Episode 90 of Merriwether's World is in the books. Only 10 more episodes to go. And then you'll have to find some other entertainment on Thursday evenings. So love you all. Stay safe. Keep the fight. See you tomorrow at the donut shop.